On February 28, 1953, Stalin and a small number of his inner circle, consisting of Lavrent Beria, Nikita Khrushchev, Georgy Malnkov, Vyacheslav Molotov, and others, gathered together for an evening of drinking. After the guests left around 4 a.m. on March 1, Stalin went to his private bedroom with instructions that he was not to be disturbed until sounds were heard indicating that he was awake. No sounds were heard throughout that day. Around 11 p.m. on March 1, his housekeeper entered his room and found him lying on the floor, wearing pajama trousers and a shirt. He was unconscious, breathing heavily, and unresponsive. He had also wet himself. At 7 a.m. on March 2, Beria and a group of medical experts were called to examine Stalin. Their examination revealed his blood pressure was 190/110, and he had right-sided hemiplegia. They concluded that Stalin, who had a known history of severe hypertension, had sustained a hemorrhagic stroke involving the left middle cerebral artery. Over the next 2 days, he received a variety of treatments. In an attempt to decrease his blood pressure, which had risen to 210/120, 2 separate applications of 8 leeches were applied to his neck and face. But Stalin's condition continued to deteriorate and he died at 9:50 p.m. on Thursday, March 5, 1953. His body was taken to an unspecified location and an autopsy was performed, after which it was embalmed for public viewing. Beria's son, Sergei Beria, later said that after Stalin's death, his mother Nina told her husband that, "Your position now is even more precarious than when Stalin was alive." She was right. In June that year, Beria was arrested and charged with a number of crimes. He was found guilty of treason, terrorism and counter-revolutionary activity by the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union on December 23, 1953, and executed the same day. He was shot personally by General Pavel Batitsky. On March 6, Stalin's open casket was put on display at the Hall of Columns in the House of the Unions, where it stayed for 3 days. On Monday, March 9, the body was taken to Red Square for its interment in Lenin's mausoleum. Speeches were delivered by Khrushchev, Malnkov, Molotov and Beria. Afterwards, the pallbearers carried the coffin to the mausoleum. As Stalin's body was interred, a nationwide moment of silence was observed at noon Moscow time. As the bells of the Kremlin clock chimed on the hour, sirens and horns sounded all over the Union, along with a 21-gun salute fired from the Kremlin. Similar observances were also held in other Eastern Bloc countries like Mongolia, China and North Korea. Immediately after the silence, a military band played the Soviet national anthem, and then a military parade of the Moscow garrison was held in Stalin's honor. While trying to pay their respects to Stalin, a number of Soviet citizens, who had traveled from all over the country to attend the funeral, were crushed and trampled to death in the crowd's stampede. They were crushed against walls and Soviet army trucks, which had been deployed to block off side streets. Mourners, along with some mounted police and even their horses, were trampled to death in Trubnaya Square. The Soviet government didn't report the event immediately, so the exact number of casualties isn't known. Khrushchev later estimated that 109 people died in the stampede, although the real number of deaths is thought to be in the thousands. In Albania, concerned their departure may encourage their rivals within the ranks of the Party of Labour of Albania. Neither Prime Minister Enver Hoxha or Deputy Prime Minister Mehmet Shahu wanted to travel to Moscow to attend the funeral. Instead Hoxha pledged eternal allegiance to the late Stalin. Guatemalan officials in the government of Jacobo Arbenz eulogized Stalin as a great statesman and leader whose passing is mourned by all progressive men. The Guatemalan Congress paid tribute to Stalin with a minute of silence. After Stalin's death, Patriarch Alexei I composed a personal statement of condolence to the Soviet Council of Ministers, saying, "His death is a heavy grief for our fatherland and for all the people who inhabit it. The whole Russian Orthodox Church, which will never forget his benevolent attitude to church needs, feels great sorrow at his death. The bright memory of him will live ineradicably in our hearts. Our church proclaims eternal memory to him with a special feeling of abiding love. He also gave a eulogy on the day of Stalin's funeral. Other Orthodox officials attended the funeral.